Okay, I guess I'll take a question from, let me scroll up here. Okay, German American says, and I guess this question is directed toward Paul, how can Christianity be more rational than atheism if Christianity, based on the literal interpretation of the Bible, isn't even rational within itself? Paul?
Hello? Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Well, I guess that's the question we're debating. He just basically said, how can it be rational? Because it's irrational. I mean, how would I respond? It's rational because, as I have argued tonight, it provides a worldview in terms of which those basic paradigms of rationality make sense in. That's basically, I don't see how that's any argument against Christianity to say, how is it rational when it talks about irrational things? That's called begging the question.
Okay.
No, it's not begging the question. It's a very good question. According to rationality, whatever its basis is, snakes do not talk. Donkeys do not talk. Seven-headed red dragons with tails of scorpions do not speak. People do not walk on water unaided. Food does not magically fall from the sky. Disembodied hands don't float in the air and write words on the wall. The Nile River does not turn actual blood. According to rationality, according to induction, according to all that we know about how the world works, those claims are irrational claims, and you might want to assert them anyway on a presuppositional basis, but the Bible makes claims that are simply not rational. If cattle will stare at a striped pole, for example, then they will become fertile, as the Bible says, and on and on and on. You find all sorts of non-scientific, primitive, now disproved ideas that the primitive peoples of the Bible used to believe. There might be some truth in the Bible, but there are certainly a lot of things in the Bible that are irrational, and based on rational grounds, the rational grounds that Paul tends to revere, those stories ought to be rejected.
All right, Dan. Okay, let's go ahead and take this call here, and let's try to keep it short, guys, if we can, okay? All right, let's take this call. I think the line's open. Hello,
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, this question is for Mr. Barker.
Sure.
Mr. Barker, you said that logic is how a rational mind functions. But how do you know when a mind is functioning rationally? How do you check that out?
Good question. Thank you.
Well, yeah, that is a good question, and that's a question that a lot of philosophers are dealing with now. But I think, the key word is health, and an organism is healthy if it survives in a way that causes, I think, a minimal amount of harm in the world. So there are probably some yardsticks that we could use. I mean, if a person says, rationally, I'm going to stick my hand in the fire and it won't burn me, and we see that person stick their hand in the fire and it does burn them, we would call that an unhealthy action, and therefore we would say that person is not mentally healthy. Their logic is not functioning right. Brains can malfunction. Brains can go wrong to a great degree or sometimes to a lesser degree. You can have schizophrenics or you can have schizotypical people. You can have all sorts of gradations in the middle. And I think most of us, including me and Paul and most of our listeners, are pretty much healthy in most of our lives. We fall somewhere in the middle of that bell curve of mental health. But, you look at behavior, you look at how a person acts, and if a person is acting in self-destructive ways based on a logical conclusion, we can say, well, that's not logical. And if you ask them to formalize it and spell it out to you, you might be able to point out the actual logical fallacies. You might be able to catch them in a contradiction, for example, or in a non sequitur.
Okay. All right, Paul.
Yes, that was a good question as well, and it's one of the ones I asked in my cross-examination, Dan. It appears that you didn't quite understand it. Basically, what the question is saying is if rationality, if laws of logic are something in your mind, then how do you check them? And then what you mentioned, you brought up, well, there's this yardstick. See, what you've done now is transcended them outside the mind as something which both the minds could be checked against. See, so what that's doing is basically you're going against your position that it's just something inside the mind. And then you started basically talking about harm, which isn't really isn't on the subject of the laws of logic. And so what we have here, basically, Dan's trying to give an account for it, but you see, he wasn't acting according to his functionalist theory of mind, his physicalism. What he needs to do is give an account for this sort of stuff in physical, causal terms, non-rational terms. Things like rocks and laws of physics are non-rational, okay? And so Dan needs to give an account for them according to those lines, non-propositive and non-rational terms. And he can't give an account for them that's at the base is something that's rational. He can't give a basic account that's rational because he's...
Right. Okay. Let's go ahead and take this. We have another call here. Hello?
Hello?
Hi.
Yeah, I have a question for Dan.
Okay.
Okay, Dan.
Can you speak up? You're really faint here.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Dan, I'm just curious. When it comes to morality, it seems like you've kind of made harm and the avoidance of harm your absolute. And I'm just wondering, upon what basis, upon what rational basis, is harm itself even a bad thing?
Great question.
Because harm threatens our very existence. We are evolved organisms, and sticking your hand in the fire, jumping off a cliff, drowning in water, or you name it, there are many things that will actually threaten our survival as individuals and as a species. And this is what we call harm. It might hurt, or it might not even hurt at all, but it can still be harmful. I mean, you might die from a odorless gas. There's no pain. It's that we would still call it harm because it threatens our survival. So I think generally, harm would be defined as something which threatens our ability to continue to exist or to reproduce as a species, or compromises it in some way. And I guess some people would even say happiness could be harmed. I don't know about that. There's so many philosophies. But I would like to point out that I just represent one atheistic point of view, just like there are different Christian points of view. I do not speak for all atheists on morality. There are some atheists who are moral realists, and I am not one of them.
All right, Paul?
Yeah, basically the response to that is that it causes harm, and that's bad for our society. The response to that, it's pretty technical. It goes like this. Who cares? Okay? Who cares? We're pieces of broccoli, okay? And the cosmic universe really doesn't care about us at all. And we don't really know if we're right because humans make mistakes all the time. And so basically Dan has this opinion that he's come up with, that he's admitted, maybe I could be totally off, that says, well, causing harm is bad. It hurts people and it hurts the species. It's not defining harm. I mean, what is it to harm someone? Okay, can you? Some people might train for the Olympics, and doing that, they're being caused harm. So this would have to be fleshed out a bit. And given evolution, that certainly makes no sense to given the evolutionary hypothesis and survival of the fittest. And animals do harm other animals all the time. And so why should we listen to Dan? Why should someone else listen to Dan saying, well, you shouldn't harm people because then we can't survive? No, I can just make myself stronger so Dan can't harm me, and then I'll harm Dan because he has the car that I want. So that it makes no sense to stipulate that harm is wrong just to go ahead and tell everyone, to tell a bunch of people of pieces of broccoli that they shouldn't harm other people, other pieces of broccoli.
Okay. All right, got a question from the chat room now. I'm getting a lot of questions geared toward Dan, so let's gear some here toward Paul here. It looks like Hook Flash in the IRC room is asking, Paul, if you can justify logic, reason, and morality by presupposing the existence of God, then why can't the atheist just presuppose the justification of logic, reason, and morality?
Well, basically, first off, that option isn't open to Dan tonight because he told us that you can't just presuppose things. Presupposing doesn't make it true. So we would have to note that doesn't make Dan's position rational. Secondly, presuppositions in the Van Tillian scheme aren't just a bunch of arbitrary presuppositions. You don't just arbitrarily choose your presuppositions like you do hats. So the problem here is that you have to put it together into a worldview. And you see, as an atheist, I would argue, and as Dan's mentioned, there's different views out there, so I'd have to see the particular atheist's views. What we have here is someone that needs to put a worldview together. So if you're going to say, well, I can just presuppose the laws of logic, and I also have a view that everything that exists is material. Okay, well, the laws of logic are not material in nature. So what you're saying on one hand is, well, I say that everything that exists are marbles, and then I'll presuppose that some non-marble entities exist. Okay, so that's the problem, is that your worldview undermines these presuppositions, and furthermore, an atheist might want to go ahead and do that and take it on faith.
All right, Dan?
Well, see, Paul is exactly illustrating the problem that his mind is unable to grasp, and I keep saying this over and over again. You keep thinking that something like logic is a thing that has to be justified. You need your consciousness raised here. In an earlier answer, you said that I have to justify the rational in terms of the non-rational. That would be like asking, I have to justify the digestional in the terms of the non-digestional. You know, you're building sphere upon sphere, pretending that a word within one logical context has some relevance or meaning in a higher sphere. Logic is a function. It is a computational function of a working brain. If there were no minds or no organisms with minds or something like minds in them, then there would be no logic. It is only when brains are thinking, it's only when a brain is working that we have to make these computations. Is that an enemy or a friend? Is that something to mate with or something to run from? Is that food or is that poison? You know, we make these computations, we make value judgments, not because there is a capital V value out in the world, but because relative to ourselves. And you missed my point earlier about whether we're broccoli or not. I agree, cosmically, we are just broccoli. But inside out, relative to ourselves, relative to a piece of broccoli, broccoli is valuable. Relative to me, a human being, human beings are valuable, and we have value, and we have instincts, and we have a brain that is evolved to process that value. So you're comparing apples and oranges, Dan. Paul.
Yeah, okay, let's move on to the next question. Another question to Paul here, I believe it's from Lucretius in the stick cam room, is asking, why should we even listen to God? Paul.
Well, because he is the ultimate authority. He's the creator of everything, and you are his creature. Every word that he utters is true. Everything that he does is always right. He always knows what's best for us. He knows us better than we know ourselves. He knows how to live our lives better than we know how to live them. The purpose and chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. So given the Christian worldview, we should go ahead and listen to God. Given a non-Christian worldview, according to your views of God, the false views of God that you have, well, then I can understand why you wouldn't want to listen to God. But given our worldview, you should listen to God, and those are very rational reasons for why you should. And even assuming that God exists, given when you say, well, God exists, and I'll assume that He exists, why should we listen to Him? Well, then assume the whole story. Assume that it's a being who knows everything, knows you better than you know yourself, knows how you should live your life and what is best for you. Then, of course, we should all say, yeah, we should listen to that kind of being if he existed.
Dan?
Well, all of those things you say about God, I mean, how do you know that's true? I mean, you claim to know that's true because a book told you that that's true. And it's only because you are choosing to believe the words of those primitive writers who told you that that is true. But when you examine those words in the context of history, in the context of science, in the context of biblical criticism, comparative mythology, and on, when you use those tools to examine those words which inform you about the character of this God, we find out that those words fall apart. They are not dependable. They are internally contradictory. They go against what we know to be scientific. They go against what we as a society deem to be moral. If there is a God, if your God does exist, I mean, if that God really is there, well, who is He to say? Because He's powerful? Because He's going to punish me if I disagree with Him? Who is He to say that I don't have the freedom to look Him in the face and tell Him to go to hell? Just because He created me, that makes Him morally superior to me? My aim in life is to glorify this monster? Is it my child's aim in life to glorify me, the Father? No, it isn't. I would hope that my children would disagree with me if I mistreat them in some way. Paul's worldview is a morally bankrupt. It's a slave master, a slave to a slave master mentality. It is not morality, and it is not.
All right, Dan. Okay, let's. We have 3 minutes left here, so let's try to squeeze this in. I have one final call. Let's see if we can give you guys both a minute each. I'll be looking at it very closely, and if we happen to get cut off at the Free Thought Media feed, I apologize. Just jump on over to Stickcam if you need to really quickly, just for the final couple of seconds. Okay, let's take this call here. Hello?
Hey, hi, Reg. My name's Chris. I wanted to make some points about logic that have already
been
discussed.
Can you speak up?
I'm sorry. First of all, logic is not descriptive. It's a methodological statement. Therefore, logic itself doesn't need to be subjected to proof. It's the standard by which proofs are possible. Logic is based on either axioms or it's based on rules created in the system. So the basic point that Paul's making is an error. Second, he made a claim that there's no epistemic justification for induction. That's false. If you go back to the 1700s, you have Bayes' theorem, and later logicians added to that, and they have given us what we call today axiomized. Well, I just want to make the point that induction is based on a due system, so it has an epistemic support.
All right, this isn't really a question, but Paul, go ahead and respond. Thank you for the call.
Okay. Basically, I never said that the laws of logic were descriptive. I actually said that they were normative. So I don't see how that's a refutation of my position. It's not, since it attacked a straw man. And I also asked how we can account for it given our worldview. Okay, if you have a worldview, again, that says all that exists are marbles, all that exists are matter, you can't say that some marble entity exists, just like Dan admitted tonight. He said logic doesn't exist. And I never said that there's no epistemic justification for induction. I think I have one. What I said is Dan's pragmatic justification was not an epistemic justification, but a pragmatic one. That's what I said. So I guess I wasn't clear enough in my point on that.
Okay. All right, Dan?
If there is a God, it would be an amazing thing to know. This God would be made up of something. This God has a functional mind that works in an orderly, logical way. It makes decisions. It has moral judgments. It has desires to create. It has angers. It has emotions. If there's a God, the mind of this God is an amazing, complicated, functionally impressive thing. Whatever it's made out of, whatever it's composed of, and it can't be a simple thing. It has to have discrete parts within it so that it can have decision-making, antecedents before you make one decision to another. It has to have some kind of functional computer brain functioning to it. Whatever it's made out of, you could call those things marbles, too. Whatever it is, you call them spiritual marbles if you wish. If it somehow denigrates my worldview to think that all we live in is a world of functioning marbles, well, then the same argument applies to this God itself, who has no external justification for its intelligence, its logic, or its moral principles. It just is allowed to exist on its own. And in the atheistic worldview, we think the universe is allowed to exist on its own, and relative to us as human beings with functioning brains that have to make value judgments, we can say that our life is beautiful, that our lives have purpose and meaning and morality, and we can say that we have some ways of deciding whether to label someone as moral or immoral, logical or illogical.
Well, all right, well, hey, thank you both, gentlemen, for appearing on the program to talk about which is more rational. I really appreciate it, Paul, Dan. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Thanks a lot, Reggie.